Welcome to the DNX Podcast, the number one resource for entrepreneurs, nomads, and impact-driven souls. And I am your coach, Silvia Christmann. Hello and welcome back. This is another episode from our What You Don't Know About Me series. I'm so excited you've been listening to these. We've gotten an amazing amount of feedback, and I really appreciate all the love that you have been sending in. Well, today I want to share with you one of the biggest challenges I've always faced, and that is trying to fit myself into a description of my life that fits conventional thinking. And I know that might seem like an oxymoron to you, but I've actually tried to do that on many occasions. The strength of me and the success of my career is solely based on the fact that I have never followed conventional thinking or tried the conventional path. Actually, that's not true. I've definitely tried the conventional path, and it's more like a square peg, round hole sort of problem than anything else. I do really well outside of the convention, and it almost feels like I fizzle away if I try to fit the mold. I am somebody who creates the rules, who functions outside the mold, but sometimes you need to actually describe to people what you do. So this past week has been really interesting because not only was I working with several of my clients on their resumes because they're trying to change their careers and they're working towards a new professional trajectory. And so, you know, with what they have and what they do and where they're going, it is rather easy for me at least to help them guide along that path to find their unique niche. Now, I felt prompted to actually sit down and create a resume myself for once. And the truth is, I've never really had to do that. And here's why. Because I've always in my life either worked for myself, been an entrepreneur, or the jobs that I had because somebody worked with me, we interacted in some professional capacity, and they really wanted me to join their team. And they would work really hard in convincing me that this was what I wanted and that I should be part of their team. So for me, life has always gone a totally different way. I've never really applied for a job or sat in an interview because I've had founders and people who run businesses ask me to work for them because they believe in my abilities and my expertise. So I almost feel that my life has gone the other way around. So I've never sat there and begged somebody to hire me. I've actually been rather suspicious towards people that were really trying hard to convince me that I should be part of their venture. And I've usually made that really difficult for them on top of it before I agree to work with them. And I have not once regretted joining the teams that I ended up joining. What's funny about it is, though, that I never wrote a resume. I never had one. I never wrote one. And I think if you try to explain my professional trajectory on a resume, or at least all the formats that are out there, it just falls short. For example, one of the biggest examples is let's start with my education. So I went and I was in Germany. I did my Abitur. And after my Abitur, I did what many people did, and I traveled around the world. So instead of, doing what my brother did, which was immediately starting your career and immediately building a resume, which he, by the way, also wrote a book about, which he gave me when I was on my way to the airport to take my year-long, or however long I felt long, sabbatical to backpack and hitchhike around the world. So with my one-way ticket and a little bit of money in my pocket, I had booked, I had made my way over to Brazil, and I had his book as well that I joyfully read on the plane thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense, and I don't want to do that. That seems to be a guidebook for people and a life that doesn't suit me at all. It's also a book that was written for men, by men, in a world of men, that was perfect for my brother who worked in the financial sector. So I didn't want to do that. I already had problems picking my majors for my Abitur because I wanted to study math and science and art. And to me, that went well. That would go hand in hand. That made sense because I have a creative and artistic side and a hyper analytical side that is really inspired by data science and sciences. On top of that, I'm really intrigued by global economics and culture, history, and that's basically it. It's art, culture, history, economics, science. And yeah, that's it. That would summarize it. That would summarize my interests. And when I wanted to do art and art history, so I could learn the historical context of economics in conjunction with math and science, they told me that wouldn't work because they run on the same tracks. So you had options of track A and you had options of track B. And they mix traditionally art and art history with things like English, which I thought was super boring because I already spoke that language anyway. And so track A had math, science, and art on it, and you can't pair it with each other because you had to pair it with a choice from track B. And things on track B that would go along with them didn't really interest me. So that was a really big compromise, and it was the first compromise that I really struggled with because it felt that it narrowed down my interest into a construct where my life was dictated, and with it also my future, based on the assumption that somebody who studies art would never pick math. And it was explained to me in detail how this was the first occurrence of such sort ever, and nobody in their right mind would ever want to study. People that are artistic have no interest in math, which I beg to differ. But it tells you how an educational system actually dictates your choices in life. I honestly don't remember what I ended up choosing. It was some compromise that didn't feel fulfilling, and it wasn't something I was proud of. So I was forced to follow I know I didn't choose math. Yeah, I don't know. I don't actually know which direction I went. Probably art, because, felt like, I probably went with art and something else. I would not know what I chose right now. But I do know that it wasn't science, and it wasn't science, and I really did not like that. And long story short, this was something I was confronted with in a lot of the educational systems, and I found that really frustrating. So when I came to America, I was here and I got my green card, and I was here with my father and my stepmom. And so in order to really spend some honest time with them, which prior to this time I spent the majority of my life in Germany, not in the US, and it felt really important for me to be close to them for a change, to really establish a relationship. And if you're a child that has parents on two continents that are very far apart, that is actually very important decision to make at some point in your life, to actually get to know the life of the other parental unit in more detail, and not just a week or two here and there. So in the overarching trajectory of my life, that was a really an important personal one to make, because it was tremendously helpful to me and my family construct. And on top of that, in order to do that, I needed to apply for a green card, because otherwise, visa restrictions and citizenships and all of those things. Then it felt like a good idea to actually get my green card. So to pass time, and this sounds funny, but it was true, to pass time while this all took place, I enrolled in college, also because my stepmother greatly encouraged me to use the time with education and not my whimsical goals that I usually had. And I thought that was really smart, clever, and important, and I loved learning and I loved education. I had found though that the programs offered to me where I was were super limited, very restricting, very elementary, because sort of like the junior college version of the US college is like the Abitur I already held. And it was really boring. It was like going back in time by 3 years from an educational perspective. So I found a way around this, as I always do. And I created my own board of directors and my own committee, and I created a program, a graduate program for my undergrad, where I was allowed to take a certain amount of graduate level classes, which were the 500 level classes that I preferred over the 100 level classes because they overlap with an education I already had received. And so by making a very solid case study for this, I got approved with my customized curriculum, which I really loved, and it felt it was aligned with the trajectory of my education that would actually further my knowledge and not just check a box. So I think I finished the undergrad in about 2.5 years, which is a whole lot less than most people spend on their undergrad, but that had to do with the fact that I took a larger amount of classes than recommended, and because I had customized the curriculum. And so I just fast-tracked the whole system, and I made sure that the class load was challenging enough for me to feel that my mind was entertained. Now, if you look at my resume, for someone like me who has a multicultural education, has worked in a global setting, it seems rather odd that I would land at the University of South Carolina and do my undergrad in such a short amount of time. On a resume, they just ask you where you went to school, what you studied, and the dates. And that would not do the construct of my education that I assured I would receive no matter what happens in my life, that I was knowledgeable and educated. And what I didn't know at the time was that most people don't care about how much you know. They care about what labels you have. And, that to me, I wasn't, coming from Europe, that's also a little bit different. I didn't create my education towards labels. I created it around knowledge, right? Like I traveled around the world, not to read about cultures, but to live with them, to experience them, to work with them, to understand it, to learn different languages, to understand the cultural divides, and also the socioeconomic context. That is why I traveled. Other people go on vacation and with all-you-can-eat resorts. I've never been to one. So it just really depends on how you look at my life. And my greatest challenge has always been to try to fit that story and the truth of my life, my education, and why I made the decisions that I've made that have always given me, in the end, in the real world, a competitive advantage because I knew more and had a much larger world, and also not to mention the exposure to all the different languages I have encountered, lived in. I wouldn't say mastered. I don't think I've mastered any languages other than German and English. And even that is questionable at times. There's a lot of languages in the peripheral that, I sort of barely manage. I call it barely manage. And I think when you increase in volume in languages, you decrease in quality. And most people who speak multiple languages will agree with that we just naturally stop speaking any of them well. So I speak 2 of them well, and the other ones I barely manage, and I will stick to that. So I have a really vast and global education, and it's given me a lot of self-confidence. What it hasn't done is build a decent resume that would look remotely interesting to somebody who works, let's say, in HR. I don't think they could even make sense of it. And I personally wouldn't know how to tell this narrative on a resume should there ever be an event where I would actually have to send one in. I would probably be the last person they ever look at, because there's no way you can put on like a 1-page the real reason why I made my undergrad degree an interdisciplinary study program, so I could customize my education and assure that I got true value and knowledge over taking some 100 level classes of boring introductory level English, Spanish, or history that felt completely irrelevant to me. I wanted graduate level classes where I was engaged in conversations that entertained my mind. Now, this is something that comes up quite a lot because, ironically, even though I have a very successful career, I've always been thriving outside the norm. I have become known as somebody who doesn't follow rules, and rather than follow, I create them. I do have some self-esteem issues around this when somebody says, "Where's your resume?" Because I'd be like, I'm like, my what? What is this thing, this piece of paper where you fit in random numbers, names, labels, and accomplishments in a one-liner? And I know that there's many different ways to get around it, and one of them that I really invested in was my website. It is a solid bio because there I can tell a story that tells a tale. I am super excited about my website because it gives you an insight into my life, my work, my personality. It shows you how I think, what I think about in the articles. It shows you where I've been featured, what I've been featured on. It tells you what I give talks about, in front of large audiences, up to 5,000 people, which is way more interesting. So I'm still not sure what I would put on a resume, because that is just not the trajectory of my life. It does feel, and will probably forever feel, a bit like a square peg round hole problem, because my life has been extraordinary. It's been exciting. It's been super challenging because I've taken the unconventional path, and it does some people meet that with a lot of criticism. Most people meet it with a lot of adoration and respect. Some people meet it with criticism. And the people that meet it with the most criticism tend to be the ones that would want to fit me in a resume. That would be my summary. But nevertheless, I will not give up trying. And perhaps when I master the art over the next few weeks of actually putting together a resume that is not my website, that is not a badass written story, that is also my bio. It's not my mission statement because I have all of those things. But it is an actual resume with, it's just something I seem to want, when one of those pages where you have your name and your picture and your address and your phone number, and then you have your list of things. It just seems like a cool thing to have. It just seems insane to figure out how in the world I would write my accomplishment meant on that, because I can't just be like, here's the company I work for from A to B and then because I don't have a linear career. I have a massively expansive trajectory and a life that has been super challenging, super exciting. I've been really successful. I've also not been successful at all. I had to make some really hard decisions. I've led teams, I've built companies, I've failed really badly in a horrible partnership that literally cost me all of my savings, and I learned so much from that. I have advised Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, founders, CEOs, solopreneurs, a great array of extraordinary women who, like me, are out there really forging their own path, because the reality is that much of this sort of conventional world was built by men for men, and there isn't that much space for us as women. And there are some really brave souls out there that I get to work with who are forging their own path, and I feel extraordinarily honored that I get to walk with them, be their sounding board, give them backup, and make sure that not only are they successful, but that they're thriving in a fulfilling career. not taking, can't swear, the SHIT stuff from anybody, and standing tall in the face of criticism. So that, my friends, is my story of why writing a resume seems an impossible task. But if you're listening to this and you have some advice for me, I'm happy to take it. Until then, much love. Stay inspired. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your ongoing support. Before I leave you, I want to invite you into my world. Please go check out dnxcommunity.com. This is where you'll find the other nomads and evaders of convention. We'll see you there. And if you're interested in our English-speaking events, go and check out dnxglobal.com. You'll find the link below this podcast as well. And if you have time, one last favor, please go to iTunes, look for Silvia Christmann, or look for the DNX podcast and leave a review. Thank you so much, lovely people, and I'll talk to you next time.